Welcome, budding artists and designers, to the world of Photoshop. We'll cover file setup, how to navigate the interface, and some basic tools and design principles. And we'll apply that in a demo where we create an abstract art flyer. Get ready to unlock the full potential of Photoshop and become a digital art master. Okay, so now that we're in Photoshop, you should see this window. We're just going to click over here on New File to start our document. And what that should do is bring up this dialog box called New Document, and you'll see some presets, some recent items. And then across the top here, you're going to see a preset bar, and that's going to have typical printing sizes and templates for each of these different types of mediums. So you can go ahead and click through and get an idea of what kind of projects you might be working on in Photoshop. You'll notice that at the bottom of all of these, there's these templates down here. If you want to find more of those, you can go down here into Adobe Stock and find what you're looking for. For us, we're going to go to Print, and we're going to choose a letter 8.5 by 11. And then something to keep in mind is going off of these document sizes is really handy because if you're going to print these out later, companies will typically have these sizes of paper in stock already, and so they won't charge you extra for cutting irregular sizes like that. Okay, so with 8.5 and 11, we'll go over here to the right side and you'll see these preset details. The first thing you're going to see is just where you can name your document. We can just call ours Flyer Design. Below that is going to be our sizes. So you have the width and the height. Ours by default is 8.5 by 11 as a letter, but you can change those, and you can also change the dimensions here. Right next to that is the orientation that has portrait mode or landscape mode. So if you switch those, it's going to switch what's in your width and height. We're going to keep it portrait for now. The newer version of Photoshop has these artboards. You can check that on and off to have more artboards in your document. We'll go over what that is more later. Below that is resolution. Resolution is going to control how sharp your image is. It's going to control how many pixels of image data are going to be in your document. So typical size is 300, especially for print documents. You don't want anything under 300. If you're putting something on the web, you might want closer to 72 because it doesn't necessarily need to be as high, and it'll help your images load faster on web. So that's set to pixels per inch, but you can also set it to pixels per centimeter. We're going to set it to pixels per inch. Below that is color modes. So we have RGB and then some other ones. We have bitmap, grayscale, RGB, CMYK, and lab color. So the ones that we'll be using the most are going to be RGB or CMYK. RGB refers to red, green, blue, and that refers to the types of lights that are coming through your screen. So if you know ahead of time what you're making, you'll know whether or not to set it to RGB or CMYK. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And that is going to be referring to the types of inks that are available when you're printing a document. So something to keep in mind is RGB is referring to light, and so it can achieve more vibrance and brightness than inks can. And so if you're making something in RGB and go to print it in CMYK, something that you might run into is the colors are dimmer, duller, and darker. And so if you're working in CMYK from the get-go, you know that the colors that you're choosing are going to be close to the colors that show up when you've printed it. So since we're going to try to make a flyer, we're assuming that we're going to print it. We're going to set our colors to CMYK color. Okay, so below that is background contents. That's just going to say what color you want the background to be by default. We'll just stick with white, but it doesn't matter. You can always change that later. And everything here you can change later if you wanted to. And then you have some more advanced options below that. Go ahead and start with what's here, and then we'll go ahead and click Create. Okay, we'll dive right in and explore the Photoshop interface. So this is going to be your hub for digital photo editing. This is what you're going to see most of the time when you open up. If your screen doesn't look like mine, you can go ahead and go to this button right here, and you can set it to Essentials or Reset Essentials. And so that's going to open up these swatches on the left or on the right. It should set your tabs with one row on the left over here, and then everything else should be what you're seeing. So let's go through where things are typically. Navigating Photoshop and panels and menus is pretty easy once you get the hang of it. Over on the right side of your screen, you've got all of the options that you're going to need. These you can add even more options to, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. Across the top, and this might be different if you have a Mac, but across the top, at least on PC, you should see File, Edit, Image, Layer Type, Select, Filter, View, Plugins, Window, and Help. And we're going to be going over a lot of things in here, but there's a lot of different tools that are hidden underneath all of these, so just keep in mind that sometimes when you're looking for something that you didn't expect to be there, that might be where to look for it. Below that, this is going to be our options toolbar. So as you click on all of these tools here on the left, you'll notice that up here, this is going to change with each tool that we select. And that's going to just give us a little bit more room to fine tune whatever tool we've chosen. After you have all the tools and options you could ever want, each of these is going to have a little pop out for just some tutorializing and explaining to you on what they are. And we'll go over most of these during the duration of the class. But keep in mind, like, there's a bunch of selection tools, there's brushes, you can do painting, gradient tools, all kinds of stuff. So you might just slide through there and see what the pop-outs say and kind of get a good idea of what you're looking at. This is going to be where all of your tools are, and then if you look closely, you'll see these little triangles in the corners. And these triangles mean that there's another tool hidden behind them, sometimes multiple tools. So you might see like all of these lasso tools, or you might see down here, another toolbar, and you can see all of the different tools that could be in there. Okay, so now that you have a sense of where everything is most likely going to be, Photoshop should start to get a little bit quicker. Most of the time you'll select your tool, you might change things at the top, and then you'll see your settings over here on the right panel. This is going to be your main canvas, so it's our 8.5 by 11 document. If you want to toggle on rulers, you can do Control R or Command R for map. You can also go to View and check rulers right here. And so that's going to show you these distances. The first thing I want to kind of mention is guides. So this is going to help with just measuring out your tools. If you click and drag from the ruler on top, you'll start to see this guide pull out. And you can move that around. You can also drag out multiple, and you can drag them out from the left side also. If you go to View, and then you can say, you can go to View, and then Clear Guides to get rid of them. And then to toggle the ruler off again, you can do Control R or Command R on a map. Alrighty. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you guys is abstract art is this quote about abstract art. We say, abstract art is art that does not attempt to represent an accurate depiction of a visual reality, but instead uses shapes, colors, forms, and gestural marks to achieve its effect. So keep in mind what we're saying right here. We're not trying to attempt to represent an accurate depiction of reality. We're just trying to use design and colors and shapes and forms. So over here on the right, you'll start to see this layers panel. And if you're not seeing it right now, you can go to Window. Let me hide this really quick. You can go to Window and choose Layers. You can also press F7. All right. So what you'll first see are these different layer panels down here on the right. if you want to add more layers, you can click this button down here, and that's going to add more layers to your stack. With this new layer, what we can do, I'm going to set it to the brush tool over here by pressing B for brush. And I'm just going to draw a quick little doodle over here. The thing about this layer is that I can move it around now and it'll be separate from this background layer. So if I go to the background and draw something on the background, you can see first that it's behind the layer that I just drew on, and second, I can still move my top layer around and it doesn't affect this bottom layer. If I want to undo, I can do Edit, Undo, Delete Layer, or Toggle Last State. You can also do Command C or Control C, and that'll take you back different steps. If you want to move forward, you can do Control Shift C or Command Shift C, and that's going to bring you forward each step. So we will go back to Control Z, Control Z, and we'll get to where we just have that basic layer at the bottom. So you'll see on Moodle that there's going to be a video on the shape tool and Gestalt theory. So that's going to be for you to watch. It's going to talk about proximity, similarity, closure, continuity, and figure ground. So let's talk about what those are. I have a short, just little description about these different terms of Gestalt theory. So Gestalt theory is kind of a So Gestalt theory refers to the psychology of visual perception, and so there's some principles that are constant amongst humans, and that's how we group things and see things together. And so we can use these tools to kind of help control how our viewers will read our work. And so the first thing that you're going to see is proximity, and that refers to objects being close to each other and they are always perceived as belonging together. Similarity, that means that objects are similar in shape, color, and size, and that means that they'll be perceived together and belong together. If you see things that are not the same shape, color, or size as some other object, you might consider those as being not perceived as a group or not being part of the whole. So it's going to draw attention and create some emphasis. Closure, the mind tends to complete incomplete shapes or patterns to perceive them as a whole. Continuity, the mind prefers continuous, smooth, and flowing lines or patterns over disjointed ones. Figure ground, the mind perceives objects as either being in the foreground, figure, or in the background, ground of an image. And so that's just saying that when we see overlap, we're going to picture that as being behind something, not simply disappearing. Continuity, if we see something that seems continuous, we're going to picture it as continuous. Closure, that means that we're going to see things and close the gap, even if there's not a gap necessarily there. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples. So I want to show you some abstract art and just get your mind kind of inspired. And so as we're clicking through, I just want you to kind of keep in mind that they're just using simple shapes here. They have a circle and some rectangles here, and they're using color and these shapes to balance out their image. Here they're using some repetition and rhythm to create these cool designs. These ones are all coming out of the center object, and so it's directing your eye right into that middle square. This one's creating a really cool pattern where you have some repetition in the background, and then this is some of what we were talking about with Gestalt theory. And so that kind of gives some mind to the figure ground, where you have this blue as your background, and you have these white and red shapes possibly as your foreground, but maybe this white is your background instead. So it's just kind of playing on these different topics, and we'll get more into it. I have a video linked on Moodle that'll kind of explain it a little bit more. But these are just some that I wanted to show you guys to inspire you. Okay, so I clicked on a new layer, and then we're gonna go into the shape tool. So down here on the left is gonna be our rectangle tool, and if you click and hold, you'll see these other tools over here. You have rectangle, ellipse, triangle, polygon, the line tool, and the custom shape tool. Let's just start out with the rectangle tool, and then you'll notice across the top here, this is gonna change and reflect what we're using. So first thing we're gonna see is shape, path, or pixels. So if we have shape, it's going to create a vector image as we drag out our shape, and that means that I can change these poles later. If we have path, this is actually creating a selection. So if I undo what I had a second ago and set it to path. So now this is a non-printing box right now, and it's making a selection. We'll talk about paths a little bit later in the next video, but for now, just know that that's where to find that selection tool. The next one is pixels. So if I go back to pixels, and I select my layer, this is going to draw out our box, but it's not giving me these poles anymore. And so I can't move these around the same way that I could before. And it's going to lower the resolution of our square after we've drug it out, because it's using pixels and it's creating a rasterized image. So the difference between a rasterized and a vector image is that it's not using so the difference between a raster and a vector image is that it's using math in a vector image to create a perfect smooth line or perfect curve, whereas with a raster image, it's using just the data that's on the screen. And so that means that if you zoom it, or if you create this small little box here with our pixels, and we go back in and make it really, really large, that in the wrong one. That means if we draw this small little box, so that means if we draw this small little box and we make it much larger, and zoom in, okay, so if we click on the box down here on the left, that's going to be our shape tool. And if we click and hold, it'll drag out this menu of rectangle tool, ellipse tool, triangle tool, polygon tool, line tool, and custom shape tool. We're going to just stick with the rectangle tool for now. And then across the top, you'll see these different options. Now I've started a new layer, so you can go ahead and click this button. And then across the top, you'll see these shape, path, and pixels. We're going to stick with shape. It's going to create vector images. What path is going to do is create a selection of a rectangle, and I'll be able to adjust that later. And we'll talk about paths more when we talk about the pen tool next week. And then if you click on pixels, you'll see if I draw out this, it doesn't have these poles on the side where I can adjust it later. Whereas with the shape tool, I can draw out a shape and then I can still adjust that after the fact. If I drag these little dots in the inside, that's going to curve all of these. If I hold Alt, that's going to curve just one side. All right, and then if I just click, you can have, it's going to create this dialog box that says create rectangle, and it's going to ask you what you want it to draw out by default. So we could put in like 200 by 250. And let's say we want our corners rounded like we did a second ago. We can set that to 10 pixels. If we uncheck this, that means that whatever we change isn't going to affect every single corner. So we could set this one to 5 pixels. And we can click OK. And it draws out our little box for us. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those layers, and we'll start a new one. All right, so for our assignment, what we're going to be doing, okay, so across the top, moving forward, once we've drug out our box, we have fill, stroke, and then we have this little section for how big that stroke is going to be. So if we click here, it's going to let us change the color of that fill. And you can click on this little rainbow box over here and set it with whatever color you want it to be. Maybe we'll go for like a purple. Across the top here, this one's going to be a no fill, and so that's going to say that we want it to be empty and we just want to stroke around it. This one over here is going to go from our recently used colors. This is going to let us choose a gradient, and so we'll talk about gradients in a little bit, but we can choose between some of these default ones, so maybe we could choose like a preset. On the right is going to give us some patterns and textures that come with it, and we'll talk about in a different class how to make our own textures later. And then up here at the top is going to be our color selector, and so that means that we can pick whichever color we want to choose. As we go up and down this, that's going to let us go from dark and vibrant, and then pastels and vibrant. Across this left side is going to be all black and white and shades of gray, and then you'll get some of our more natural colors here in the middle. So maybe we'll go with something like that. On the stroke over here, you can see how my cursor turned into a little hand with some arrows on the left and right. If I click and hold that, it's going to let us slide that up and down. If you know what size you want it to be, you can also just enter that in over here or choose the slider over here. So maybe we wanted to set it to 2 pixels. And press enter. So now if I zoom in, you'll see I have a 2 pixel stroke around my box. Next to that is going to be our stroke options. It's going to let us choose dashed lines, dotted lines to have around the edges. So if I make my stroke a little bit bigger so we can see, it'll set it to dashed lines or dots around the edges. The alignment here is saying around this blue edge of our box, do we want these dashes and dots and strokes to be on the inside, centered, or around the outside of that line? So do you see how that makes a big difference? It makes a bigger difference definitely whenever the stroke is larger, but it can be a big tool in your toolbox. So caps is going to say on the corners, do we want it to be straight? Do we want things to be rounded, or do we want things to be squared off? And when they are squared off, do we want them to end at our poles, or do we want them to go past a little bit? And then our corners on top of that, do we want them to be rounded, or do we want them to be chamfered so they have that hard edge at the corner? We're just going to stick with squares for now. Alright, for the next section, it has the width and the height. So that's going to determine how many pixels across that is. We'll set this back to 2 pixels. So that's going to determine how many pixels across that box is and how many pixels high that is. You can also set that by just typing in inches. So maybe we want it to be 2 inches long and And maybe we want that to be 5 inches tall. If you want that to stay the same ratio, you can click here. And that's going to lock it so that it stays in that same, and that's going to lock it so that it stays with that same ratio. So if I put 4 in this width, it's going to set it to 10 on the right. And if I unlock that, that's going to let me change these independently again. So maybe I want this to be 6 inches and 10 tall. You can also use these handles to drag things around and set those to where you want them to be on their own. All right, this is the neat part. Next to that is going to be for when we're drawing new shapes. So are we going to set things on a new layer? Are we going to combine shapes? Are we going to be using them to subtract, intersect, or exclude? And we're going to try all of those in just a moment. Then we have these alignment options. So you'll see here across the top, we have align left, align center, and align right. And then align top, align center vertically, and then align bottom. Distribute is really neat. That's going to let us distribute everything evenly. So it's distributing vertically or distributing horizontally here, and we'll try that one in a little bit. And you can set that to align to the selection, so whatever layer or other object you have selected, or to the canvas, which is your white box around the outside. Then we have some bring shape forward and backwards tools. We really only use that when using the shape setting. And then we have a few more options for paths. And then this is going to be for curving those corners. So if we have it set to 44. And we can set that back to 0. Okay. So we've gone through a lot of our options at the top. Let's start with making our pattern. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of our options across the top. Let's start by making some boxes and just playing around with these tools right here. So as we've drawn out these tools, I'm going to select the subtract front shape and then draw out some more. And you'll see that as I draw it out, it's basically cutting out windows through that whole shape that we have here. All right, so then let's start again. And this time, let's do combine shapes. So as I draw these out, you can see here in our layers that it's creating all of these shapes on the same window. Whereas if I have it set to just new layer, each rectangle is going to make its own layer here on the right. I'm going to delete those. Alright, so we'll go back to the rectangle tool, and then this time let's choose intersect shape areas. So you can see here, when I've drawn out two shapes, it's going to choose where they intersect, which is pretty neat. And basically you can see that it's creating just a Venn diagram of where all of these shapes are touching. So if I draw something out here, it's not going to be intersecting anymore, and so that's not going to be, it's not going to work as well. Okay, let's add another layer, and then this time we're going to choose exclude overlapping shapes. So you can see on this one, as I draw out shapes, it's going to flip whichever color was down first. And so this is what I'd like us to play with today while we're making our abstract art posters, is just trying to draw out some of these shapes and see what we make, and then maybe trying to create some kind of pattern or texture, something that seems kind of exciting and fun. And we can use that for our poster. I'm going to delete all of these. And then let's take a look at our examples again. So if we're looking at just this one right here, we have some rectangles across the back and then 2 circles. So maybe we can try to recreate that. Well, I'm going to set my background color here. You can also select the colors right here on the left, and that's going to pull up our color picker. And so maybe we want to create something with this darker blue. And then I'm going to go to this gradient tool and click and fold, and it's going to bring up this paint bucket. So I can just click and fill in the background. Make a new layer, and then above that, I'm going to select rectangle. I don't want a stroke, so I'm going to set it to none. And then for our colors, I just want to pick a white. And then I'm going to create 1 vertical stripe. Now if I hold Alt, or if you're on a Mac, that's going to be Option, I can drag out a duplicate of that layer that we're on. And if I hold Shift while I'm holding Alt, that's going to lock it so that I have perfectly aligned vertical stacks. So I can do that again. And you can see that it's trying to create that similar distance in between them with those pink lines. I'm just going to scooch that over. And I think I want them to be a little bit thinner. So if I hold Shift while I drag, that's going to let me squish this down. And then I think I want 1 more on the left here. So I'll hold Alt and move this over, and if I hold Shift, that's going to lock it in place. I'm going to wait till it says that 80 pixels on the across the side. And then I can do Control G, and that's going to group these together. The other way I can do that is by selecting all of these. By holding Shift, that's going to select all of them at once, or if they were in different spots, I could hold Control or Command and select them individually. I'll right click, and then I'll say Group from Layers. And it'll let me name the group here. You can also name it if you do Control G. I'll just call that Rectangles. Okay, so now maybe I want to center these. So I've got my rectangles, and you can see when I have my Move tool selected, all of these are blanked out because they don't have anything to align to. So what I'll do is hold Shift and click on my background layer. And that's going to bring up these controls now. So now I can align them center to the canvas. And then let's say one of my rectangles was out of whack. So if I select all of my rectangles again, I held Shift and clicked on the bottom and the top one, I can align these and distribute them horizontally. So I can click this button and it's going to put it back in place. Let's say that they're all a little bit mismatched. So I'm going to select Auto Select and Layer, and that's going to let me move things around. So maybe they're a little mismatched and I want them to be a lot more regular, like we had it. So I'm going to select all of my layers again, and I can select Align vertically on top. And then maybe we want to align them, well, let's put this one where we want it to move to. And you can see they're not quite lined up the way that they should be, right? So we'll select them all again, and we'll just set that to distribute evenly. And now we have them all lined up again. And you can see the tops aren't quite aligned. Let's go ahead and align these to the top. And they bounced up to the top, and then we can just move them forward. And we can select that background again and align that center. Oops. Let's select our group and now our background. There we go. Okay, so now we have these vertical stripes. Let's make a new layer, and then let's choose the ellipse tool this time. So we had a red and a white circle. So let's choose our fill up here. And you can see, even though I'm selecting way up here, this little caution sign is popping up, and that's saying that we're not in a CMYK color anymore. So remember what we talked about with inks and light. Basically what it's saying is no ink can produce a color that's that vibrant, and so it's going to tell us that we can move our color picker down until we get a color that is still red but not quite as vibrant as that first red. And that would be allowed to print with an ink, or capable to print with an ink. Okay, so we're on our ellipse tool. If I click and drag, that's going to drag a circle out, but you might want it to be a perfect circle. So if you hold shift while you're dragging, that's going to lock it so that it is perfectly aligned. So it's a perfectly centered circle. Alrighty. So click the remove tool, and now I can move that up a little. And this time I want to copy that, but I want it to be white this time. So if I hold Alt while I drag that, we can drag out that second circle. And then, but we have our red circle, so you can see over here in the adjustments properties. And if that's not over there, you can go to window and click on properties right here. And that'll pull that up. And you can see that the fill is set to red. And what we want to do is select the white that we had. And so something from our example is that the red circle is going to be on top of the white circle. And so we can use our layers and drag that above it so that it's in front. All right. And then the next thing I want to show you is the text tool. So if I press T, or if I click this T icon over here, that's going to give us our type tool. And you want it to be set to the horizontal type tool. And we can talk about these in a different time. If I drag out a box, it's going to fill up a text box with some filler text. And this is just Latin. It's our lorem ipsum text. And that's something that designers use just to fill the space sometimes. So I'm going to click the non-commit button up here at the top just to undo that. If I just click, it's going to give us a line, and if I keep typing, so I'll just kind of, and it'll go on and on and on all the way across the screen until I press return or enter. So you might not want to do that. Most of the time you'll probably want to drag out a text box. So I'm going to click X again. Alrighty. So maybe what I want to say is, so I've got everything selected here. I'll just hit backspace. If it wasn't selected, let's say we drag out our text box and we clicked inside, but we want to delete everything, you can do Control or Command A to select all of your text, and you'll hit backspace. So across the top, you have your different fonts and their font settings. So we have Franklin Gothic selected right now, and then we have regular and italic. If you click into here, you can choose more Adobe fonts by clicking this button right here, and that'll give you just more variety. Next to that is going to be the size of your text, and you see those little arrows pop up as I hover over that, and that's going to let us choose the size by just dragging it across. You also have a drop down of some standard sizes, so maybe we'll choose 18 point. And then next to that, these are going to be just talking about the crispness of the edges of those letters. What we'll try to go for most of the time is sharp or crisp, but I believe when we change these, it changes with it. Maybe not. Okay, so next to that, it has your alignment tools. So that has the left align, center justify, and right justify. This next box is going to be our text color. And so maybe we want that to be this red over here, and you can see as I drag out, we have our little eyedropper, and that's just gonna let us select that. If you have a specific color, you can put that into any of these boxes. So you might have the hexadecimal code, that's gonna be right here. Or you might have the CMYK code from Illustrator or InDesign, and you can enter that in over here. We'll just click OK. Next to that, you're gonna have some work texts. So that's gonna allow us to text along an arc. You can bulge it out, and we'll kind of play with those in just a second. And then next to that is gonna be our paragraph and character styles, and we'll come back to that on a different lesson. Okay, so let's go ahead and type something. We'll just say week 1. Navigating Photoshop. All right, so we have a very curly text right now with this Alex brush. Let's go ahead and set it back to Franklin Gothic. And then maybe we'll set that text size to 150. Oh, too big. Let's scale it down. All right, I'll press enter. So we can see maybe we want to align it left or right. Maybe we want it centered. And then maybe we want to have this along an arc. And you have some options down here whenever we do that. We could set it to bulge. And you can see how it's changing these. And these are just some fun tools. You might not use them very much. You might use them a lot. It's kind of up to what you're designing. So go ahead and play with these a little bit and just see how they're affecting your text. I'm gonna set it back to none, and we'll click OK. Okay, we have week 1 navigating Photoshop. So something that we want to keep in mind is how things are being balanced. So with the red and the white circle, we had a lot of balance just a little while ago. And so maybe we want to have it a little bit bolder. And maybe we want to have it set to left justify to kind of balance out this red over here. All right, and then something that we have here is week 1 and navigating Photoshop. I think that it might look nice to have the week 1 be about the size of the text that's below it. So maybe we could do that. And I don't want to have these edges over here kind of tangent with this line that's behind it, so maybe we scale it down just a little bit so that we're definitely inside of that white shape. And same with over here, we just want that alignment to feel like it's part of this design that we have. Okay, so that's kind of one example. I'm gonna select all of these. In the layers panel over here, I'm going to right click and say new group. And we'll just say flyer design log. And then if I hide it with the eyeball, put them in there. So let's go ahead and select all of these, and we can click and drag them and drop them into this group. And now I can hide the eyeball, and it's going to hide my flyer. Okay, so let's do one more. And maybe I'll select the ellipse tool again, and this time I want to set it to exclude overlapping shapes. And I think I want to just play around with some of these and see what kind of pops up as I'm drawing out these shapes. So that it locks it in place. And this one will set in a different color. Okay. So earlier if you remember, we were talking about the Gestalt theory. And I just want to point out to you, so we have similarity here, and you can see objects that are similar in shape, color, or size are perceived as belonging together. And so if we go back to our picture that we have right now, we can see that all of these feel like they belong together as one group. But when we have this white object that's a different color, it stands out and it draws our attention here. Maybe we can move this around so that it balances out a little bit better. And so now we're kind of using continuity on top of that to kind of draw our eye up into this white circle. And let's grab our text tool again. And we'll call this similarity. All right. Then we have kind of a fun little poster. And we have a few kind of examples of some abstract art posters that we can make with just the shape tool and with the text tool also. The last thing I want to kind of explain is our free transform. And so free transform is going to be really important. We'll talk about this. We'll use it all the time in Photoshop. And you can either go into edit, and if you go down, you have free transform and transform power. So we'll click that. And what that's going to let us do, let's do it on just a new layer actually. And I'm going to grab the brush tool and I'm just going to drag out kind of a squiggle again. So if I do edit and free transform, that's going to give me those handles again. And so that's going to let me change the size. If I hold shift, that's going to let me squish it up and down. If I hold my cursor just a little bit outside the corners, it's going to let me rotate it. If I hold Alt, if I hold Control, that's going to let me distort it. And if I hold Alt and distort at the same time, that's going to let me choose perspective shift. And if I right click, I have a bunch of other options in here. So maybe we click on warp, and that's going to give us some tools to let us kind of push and pull this even further around. And right now I'm streaming, so it's got a little bit of lag, but I want you to go ahead and play around with that tool. The key command for that is Control T, so T for transform, or Command T if you're on a Mac. So you'll see Control T here, or Command T if it's a Mac. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and play around with those and go ahead and create another flyer. It should be, let's put this on the text. Okay. So we want an 8.5 by 11 inch flyer. We want it to be 300 ppi for our resolution. And we want to play around with the text tools, play around with layers a little bit, and play around with the shape tools. All right. Lastly, let's talk about how we save everything. So we can save by doing File, Save, or Save As. And you might be pretty familiar with those. We can also do File and Export though. And we have this Quick Export as PNG or Export As. And it's going to bring up a different dialog box that'll let us save as a JPEG as well. So I'm going to hit Cancel for now. And I'm going to do Export, Quick Export as a PNG. And it's just going to let me save my flyer as a PNG file. So let's talk about the file types that you might have. So we have PNGs. Go to File and Save As. So let's talk about the different file types that you might have. So when you're saving, you'll come across Photoshop documents, PSDs. You might also get PDFs, and you might get TIFF files. So you've kind of got a whole alphabet of file types to save things as in Photoshop, and it has these different file types have different strengths and weaknesses. So with these different PSDs, PDFs, and TIFF files, they have really high resolution and they maintain their layers. So when we save them and open them back up, we'll be able to still maintain these layers over here on the right. Whereas if we saved or if we exported as a PNG or a JPEG, we'll have some compression, but we'll also have a lower file size, which can be helpful in not having so much to export. Sometimes that can be hard to transfer things. Sometimes that can also be hard for things to load up on the web. And so you might want an image that has as little compression as possible, but isn't such a huge file size that it's going to not be able to load up. You might want to save things as a PNG. If you want, it might have really bad compression, but really small, so perfectly capable for any website to load up. You might want a JPEG. And then Photoshop and TIFF files are going to be Photoshop and TIFF files are going to be perfectly uncompressed, and they're going to keep our layers editable, but they can be pretty big and really hard to transfer documents between. So we'll go ahead and save this one as a Photoshop document for now. And we'll just click OK. And then we'll also do File and Export and Quick Export as a PNG. And we'll save that as well. Okay. Alrighty, designers, so I hope you got everything that you needed out of that demo. I know it's going to be really chopped up and really scattered, but hopefully as class goes on, it's going to get a little bit cleaner. So your assignment is going to be creating your own abstract flyer. It'll be 8.5 by 11, 300 DPI or PPI, and then you're going to be using some of those tools that we went over. So that's going to be the shape tools, the move tools, the alignment tools. That's also going to be the text tool and the free transform. And I hope that you're excited to get started. I'm excited to see what you guys make. Go ahead and post those in the Discord if you have any questions that you want to work together on. And then if you have questions for me, feel free to email me. And then remember, your assignments are going to be due next Sunday, April 7th on Moodle, and there'll be a description for the assignment there too. All right, have a great week, you guys. Thank you.